Hello! So, as you may know, my first novel, The Aziola's Cry, story of Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley, you can see it over there in the corner, is coming out on the 7th of May. I'm already talking to some reviewers, certainly talking about it to my friends a lot. I'm very excited about this. One thing that I have been asked a few times now is firstly, why did you call it The Aziola's Cry? And secondly, what on earth is an Aziola? Which are two pretty good questions. Now, if you don't know what an Aziola is, you're not alone. Probably you wouldn't know what an Aziola is unless you are a Shelley scholar of some sort, or just a massive Shelley fan. And you probably have come to it through Percy Shelley's poem, Do You Hear the Aziola's Cry? Which Aziola, this is actually a feminization of the Italian word for the scops owl, I believe. I think the current Italian word is Asiolo, with an S rather than with a Z. So it's not particularly widely known, but it is a beautiful word to say, Aziola. I really like the sound of it. And I mean, Percy Shelley didn't know what it was, so you're certainly not alone. The point of the poem, if you're not familiar with it, is that it starts with Mary Shelley talking, saying, "Do you hear the Aziola's cry? I think she must be nigh." And Percy doesn't know what this is. He thinks he doesn't know what the word means. He doesn't know that it means an owl, and he wonders, oh, is this a woman maybe who's coming along, and he doesn't want to talk to anyone, and he's a bit, oh, no. And then he finds out it's an owl, and he realizes, oh, it's that owl I've heard so many times, and he thinks it's a really kind of sad sound, a very mournful kind of call that it has, and he sort of loves it ever after that, and says, oh, how nice. So I find it's a really lovely little poem about this just little interaction between these two people. So why, of all the poems and lines of poetry and lines of prose between Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley, did I pick this one for the title of my book? I spent a long time finding a title for this book. I really did. Initially, this was written as part of my English and Creative Writing PhD, and what I submitted for my doctorate was the novel that at that point was titled Autumn Grieving Leaves of Gold, which I still really love as a title. I still think it's an incredibly beautiful phrase. But I did see it's a little unwieldy for a book, and sort of going into a bookshop saying, have you got that one about the leaves that are autumny or something? Having worked in a bookshop, I know that's how it goes with titles. And if you do read the book, you will find that line is still in the book there. I've snuck it in somewhere special. So that I sort of knew that wasn't gonna stick, and so I really liked the idea of having a quote for the title. I thought, yeah, I went through lots of different ones, but I always thought it ended up being too much. It was a Mary Shelley quote, and it would be a Mary Shelley book, or a Percy Shelley quote, and then it would be a Percy Shelley book. And one of the big things I really wanted to do was not pick a side as much as possible. And I'm sure people will read this and they'll come away thinking, oh, Ezra's more on this side or that side. And my friends so far have certainly, the friends who've read it have kind of said, oh, I prefer this character, oh, I prefer this character. And I'm quite pleased to see that people have preferred both different characters depending on their own characteristics, because I wanted to give them both a fair hearing, and I didn't want to. I think I've looked at quite a few historical books of historical novels, especially about literary couples, so particularly Percy and Mary, but also people like Ted Hughes and Sylvia Plath, and I feel like they always come down on a side and say, right, this is we're team Ted Hughes. Sylvia was awful. How could he live with her? Or your team Sylvia Plath. He was awful. How could she live with him? And I just sort of wanted to try as much as possible and not have that divide, and say, what if we look at them as a collaborative pair, and see the difficulties that they caused each other, and they definitely did both cause each other difficulties at different times. And I don't want to kind of come in saying who won and who lost. So that was my kind of anxiety about using a quote, or not quite anxiety, but just like what I didn't want to do. And then I was thinking about this poem, and I was thinking what's lovely about it is that we have Mary's words. Do you hear the Aziola cry? Do you not hear the Aziola cry? It is. and he quotes them, he uses them, and he names her, says Mary. It's one of the few kind of poems that they have where they are kind of described a little bit, and it's very clearly about the two of them as the two people that they are, as opposed to kind of having a poetic persona. And I think that really works for me. It really resonated for me, because that's what this book was so much about, and why I started writing this book, because I was fascinated by the idea. I can remember being an undergraduate and being maybe first year or second year, and I'd been a big fan of Percy Shelley's poetry, and then I read Frankenstein. I think it was on reading list, and it kind of came up quite briefly, I think, in a session on Frankenstein, that and she'd been married to that romantic poet, and I suddenly went, hang on, these books were written at the same time. There's this and I sort of tried to imagine that domestic scene of one person, someone over here is writing Frankenstein, someone over here is writing Mont Blanc. These are two incredible works of literature, and isn't that a fascinating household to be in? And that's kind of what led me down this whole book, to say, what is the life behind these stories? And a very sad life too. So that is what it was. So I'm going to leave you with the poem that inspired me, which you'll find right in the very front of this book, very first page. I've quoted the whole thing. Do you not hear the Aziola's cry? Methinks she must be nigh, said Mary, as we sate in dusk, ere stars were lit or candles brought. And I, who thought this Aziola was some tedious woman, asked, who is Aziola? How elate I felt to know that it was nothing human, no mockery of myself to fear or hate. And Mary saw my soul and laughed and said, disquiet yourself not, 'tis nothing but a little downy owl. Sad Aziola, many an eventide thy music I had heard, by wood and stream, meadow and mountainside, and fields and marshes wide, such as nor voice, nor lute, nor wind, nor bird the soul ever stirred. Unlike and far sweeter than them all. Sad Aziola, from that moment I loved thee and thy sad cry. It's a beautiful poem, I think. Beautiful poem about, I suppose, fearing something from the human world, except perhaps with that one person who sees your soul, who can kind of understand you and reassure you. It's lovely. So I hope you like that poem as much as I do, and I hope you like the book as much as I do. Take care, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon.